the U.S. Supreme Court, the 5 right-wingers on this court, are proving that the Supreme Court is not an impartial body, that the Supreme Court, at least these 5 members of the court, are just political hacks, partisan political hacks. You will recall in Bush v. Gore, the argument that was made, and I'm not making this up, you can read Bush v. It's a relatively short decision. You can read it online yourself. In the Bush v. Gore Supreme Court case, the argument that was made by the attorneys arguing on behalf of George W. Bush, who had been coached by John Roberts down in Florida. These attorneys argued that if the vote was allowed to be counted in the country, in the state of Florida, that it would cause, and I quote, irreparable harm to George W. Bush. End of quote. Now, there was no concern about irreparable harm to Al Gore. And that was the basis of the court's ruling, that even though the Florida Supreme Court had ordered that the vote be counted in Florida, so much for states' rights, we're going to overrule the Florida Supreme Court and stop the counting of the vote. Because, as Sandra Day O'Connor later said, she wanted a Republican president to replace her, and she wanted to retire because her husband had Alzheimer's. I mean, she said this in a newspaper interview. This was, the Supreme Court picking a president. Well, now, I mean, in Ohio, you've got John Kasich, the governor of Ohio, who was the co-founder of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, along with Paul Weyrich. The guys who said, I don't want everybody to vote. Our leverage in the elections goes up as the voting populace goes down. Well, the guy who helped start that organization is running the state of Ohio, which just passed these voter suppression laws that did away with an entire week of early voting, did away with Sunday voting so that traditionally African-American churches could do their souls to the polls thing, where you go to church, then you get a bus and go to your district and your precinct and vote. Did away with same-day registration. And it was 5-4. But what's amazing is the court did not say why. And what's even more amazing is that it used to be back in the day, back in the late 19th century, and I'm not sure when this changed, but it used to be that the members of the Supreme Court were the justices of the circuit courts. And three months out of the year, they were in D.C. and they were the Supreme Court. And 9 months out of the year, they did what was called riding the circuit, and they would travel through their various circuits and or be in the biggest city in their circuit, and they would decide cases in those circuits as the circuit court judges, and very often refer cases to themselves. One of the most notorious guys who did this, it was in the 1880s, it was Stephen J. Field, who had been bribed. He was fully owned by the railroad barons of the Gilded Age, and he kept tossing up to his own Supreme Court, on which he also served, these cases that gave constitutional rights to railroad corporations. The famous one is Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad, 1886. Corporations are people. But in any case, the Supreme Court used to also be these inferior courts, as the Constitution refers to them. Now the federal district courts are separate. They've got their own judges who are appointed by the president and ratified or advice and consent, whatever the word is, by the Senate, confirmed by the Senate. And in Ohio, the federal court for the district that includes Ohio, and I think it was the 6th district, I could be wrong, but whatever it was, both a single judge and the entire court, it was either three judges or all 11 of them en banc, whatever it was, they twice ruled that early voting was illegal. I mean, not that banning early voting was illegal, but this was wrong. This was voter suppression. And so the Supreme Court overturned 2 federal courts that had said There's nothing wrong with early voting. Prove to me that there's some harm being caused to somebody by early voting. Well, John Kasich, the governor of Ohio and the co-founder of ALEC, would say, well, the harm is that the government has to, pay for the cost of running the polls. So it may cost us a few $100,000 or $1 million to do this. And to keep a balanced budget, we may have to raise taxes on millionaires or something. I mean, that kind of thing, right? But the application for a stay was granted. The court, the district court's September 4th, 2014 order granting a preliminary injunction is stayed pending the timely filing and disposition of a petition for a writ of cert. In other words, basically what the Supreme Court is saying is, we will wait to hear you make the initial presentation of this case to us so that we can decide, so that four of us can decide whether or not all of us are going to hear the case. Okay, so in other words, the Supreme Court did not hear the case, did not rule on the case. But in the meantime, between now and the time that we decide whether or not we're going to even hear this case, nobody can vote in Ohio early. We're going to give it to the Republicans. And then they add Justice Ginsburg, Justice Breyer, Justice Sotomayor, and Justice Kagan would deny the application for stay. In other words, they would say, go ahead and vote, people in Ohio. But no, the Supreme Court says, no, you can't do it.